So one of the key things to fitting is data. Yeah, we all need it. That's why we've all got the TrackMan, whether it's a TrackMan or a GC cord or some kind of launch one to measure data. So the data's something that we use to help to analyse someone's performance, but what does it all mean? You know, we've got all this information to hand, but actually for a player coming in to see us, what are we looking for and why?
Yeah.
So I'll just hit a couple of shots just to get a bit of data on the screen with a mid iron. We'll do a couple of I'll hit a couple of mid irons. We'll run through that, and then we'll switch the driver.
Yeah, see how we go.
And then explain why we're looking for different things. So it's all to do with finding a good balance of performance for someone, really, isn't it? I think I might just quit while I'm ahead.
Yeah, that's a nice start. Nicely on the centre line.
I'll leave it on that one. I'll take that one and we'll talk through that.
So, just running through these numbers. Now, Simon's club is a very traditional club with traditional loft. Would you agree, Simon? You have forged head, Miura head.
Yeah, forged Miura blade.
Yeah.
6 iron lofts at 29.
Not particularly techie head. So, I mean, there's a limit, I think, for where it is as a club head. Well, I think I would consider 140 smash to be right on your limit. Now, what is that smash factor?
What is smash? Yeah.
What is smash? So that's the first question. Quite simple maths. Take the ball speed, divide it by the club speed. That ratio on that particular shot is 1.38. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a very, very, very steady number for what is a very straightforward forged blade. In terms of our contact, if we look at the contact, you don't get much more central.
That's why I wanted to quit on that shot.
Yeah, exactly, exactly that. So, if you look at that golf shot, when we're fitting, we're looking at optimum numbers through these parameters, and a lot of it falls down to technique as well. So if we look at Simon's technique on this particular swing, these are relevant numbers to anyone who's fitting. You get guys who come in, particularly when you're fitting for a driver, for instance, they'll come through and say, I've heard that 2,000 spin is the optimum spin. No, it's not. It's relevant to the player, it's relevant to their speed, it's relevant to their technique. And this is much in the same fashion on an iron. I mean, this is pretty much textbook stuff in terms of angle of attack. So what is angle of attack? Do you want to explain what angle of attack is?
Yeah, so angle of attack is, we'll move to the other camera here. Angle of attack is literally the angle that the club head's travelling at impact. So that shot there was minus 3.4, that's 3.5 degrees down. So just travelling on the way down into impact. So 0 is absolutely flat, and then a positive number is on the way up. So with an iron, we're looking for that downward strike. So that shot in particular, so 3.5 degrees down, that means I'm getting a nice sort of ball turf contact. And really on a 6 iron, it varies. I mean, all of these parameters vary slightly depending on what club you're fitting. So for a 6 iron, as we're looking at here, around optimum, inverted commas, around about 4 degrees down.
Yeah,
would be roughly.
But I do think, I mean, 3.4 I see as a very good number.
It's downward for a start.
Yeah, for a
start.
That's
one of the key things.
And that's also relevant to fitting. I mean, I know if I were to get a number, I'm a shallower delivery to you. I tend to be a bit more of a picker off the turf.
Yeah.
I would probably see a slightly higher launch in yourself with a lower spin number. Factor in as well my ball speed, optimum ball speed on a 6 iron for me would be about 118. Yeah. So you're quicker as well. With that speed differential, I'm likely to get a lower spin. So my optimum flight is obviously going to be a higher launch with a lower spin, and it's understanding in a fitting where that player is in technique and what you can do with that player to optimise their kit. Yeah.
As you say, the ball speed efficiency number, the smash number, again, that varies as loft goes down. The more you go to a driver, the higher that number becomes because you're getting more forward momentum off the face. As you go to a wedge, some of wedge shots, you can actually have less ball speed than club speed on a delicate little kind of cut-up
high
shot.
lofted one, yeah.
So that generally, you'd always want to be in a similar sort of place through golfer to golfer and even technique to technique as well. But what will change is, one of the key things looking at launch and spin is that angle of attack number. So the steeper someone is, the lower they're likely to launch it and the higher they're likely to spin it. Because of getting that action, there's a bit of rip and a bit of friction as the club head kind of hits down, it grips the ball. pinches it, squeezes it, launches it lower, but then you get more backspin. If you're catching it shallower, you're normally delivering a little bit more loft. But it's a squarer hit, so it's higher launch with less of that friction, less of that spin. So you would be looking for quite different parameters. So the other factors there on a 6 iron, again, the launch and spin, and again, we just talked about angle of attack, shifting those launch and spin numbers. Club speed is also the other bit that's going to dictate what a Vertical's good launch and spin are too. So for me, at 90 odd miles an hour, that's a little bit fadey, so the spin's up a little bit from where I'd want it. But I'd generally be seeing, and the launch a bit as it's faded, I'd generally be seeing,
I think if you're a little bit more neutral in
16,
path, a little bit more
launch.
neutral in path, we could see potentially a slightly stronger shot through here. A little bit lower launch again, with actually a little bit less spin.
A little bit less spin, yeah. I'd be looking for me, 16 launch, 5.5 spin.
And just nick a little bit of ball speed, potentially. A little bit square of strike.
But again, I think the spin's a key thing. That's from a fitting point of view. Depending on which club in the bag it is, every shot needs a certain amount of spin. So, low spin isn't always best. Yes, it might run further, but that's not what we're looking for from an iron. When we go to a driver, we're looking at minimising spin to a point.
Yeah. I emphasise that to a point.
Yeah. But it's very much a case of saying, well, what is optimal on the launch and the spin is really based around angle of attack, path, face to path, and what someone's patterns are. So there's always elements of play. There are kind of boundaries that would work within in an ideal world. I guess club path, actually, we're going to the other numbers. Club path, that one's a minus. Club path is horizontally what line the club's travelling at impact.
0 being at target. And
that one -4, 4 degrees left, so minus is left, plus is right. So path 4 degrees left, face to path, the right-hand number, 2.2 plus 2.2, so path 4 left, and the face is 2.2 open to path.
Yeah, I think our general rule of thumb, when you talk about the path lines and the club to path number, it's almost like a little equation within the industry that if you've got, roughly speaking, half that number in the opposite polarity, you're pretty damn good, given a good strike, because obviously the gear effect of a miss, but if it's a centre hit, that represents a very, very neutral outcome to the ball. So you can see from the outcome, it's within a foot or so of the target line, and that it's a centre hit. That's roughly half that. You can understand that. And that's what we look for in a fitting as well. When it comes to accuracy, you'll get one guy who might have an inability to square a face. And you look at it and say, your path lines are across, but we can run with those path lines if only the face is squarer. And therefore more efficiency. They could be a very high spin player, but for the wrong, just because of face angle.
Absolutely,
Introducing a lot of dynamic loft. And that, as a fitter, that you're looking to get that face angle consistent but squarer. Numbers will improve. Getting that ratio of club path to face angle that I've mentioned.
And as you say, consistency being the main thing, and we all actually move the club more consistently than we think. So a lot of golfers assume they're not good enough, not consistent enough, but actually the patterns we see, whether it's a scratch golfer or an 18 handicap, 25 handicap, actually the pattern of movement is really pretty repeating. It's just what's strike like and what's someone's balance like.
Someone can have a tendency that's not optimum, they're not as efficient as they ought to be, but if they're repeating it, you've got something to work with.
You can play from there.
And get exactly the point you made, that the notion, I'm a high handicapper, what difference does it make? It really can.
The lower handicap player has the ability to manipulate and manoeuvre and find something to make it work. What we tend to see is the high handicapper, they do what they do, and every now and then, if they're using something inappropriate, the stars will align, the hands will flip, they'll square it up and it'll go, and they go, I just put a good swing on it. But the reality is that it's far more important for a higher handicap player to play with something usable and appropriate, because that's going to make them so much more consistent. For a lower handicap player, you're nipping around the edges, you're trying to kind of tighten up the margins a fraction, losing a shot here or there.
The one difference you'll probably find between those two categories of player is the fact that a good player, it's always that refinement of a number, the very, very technical refinement. That doesn't mean to say that we don't pay as much attention to a higher handicapper, but priorities are different.
Yeah, absolutely. You're and with every golf, you're trying to minimise the miss.
Yeah.
But that becomes, the size of that miss becomes bigger and bigger as the handicap player goes up. So actually, proportionally, the difference you can make is that much bigger. That you're with the lower handicap player, you're looking at the minutiae of, let's say, for example, this shot, we'd like to drop the spin by a few hundred revolutions. We'd like to maybe get 1 mile an hour more ball speed and just optimise the flight window, the trajectory we're looking at.
Yeah.
For the high handicap player, you might be saying, okay, that's the good shot in there, but there's another one that's off the planet right every now and then.
Yeah.
And can we lose that one to hit the target that bit more often?
I mean, that's a screen that comes in quite handy. I think it's a screen that I use on TrackMan a lot more often with a driver. The reason being, I think regardless of abilities, I do see the optimizer tool is a really useful tool to demonstrate what is an optimum profile for someone.
Yeah. And it's worth hitting a couple of drivers to show that particularly. So if you want to hit a couple of drivers, we can show that optimizer tool in its entirety.
You do your thing. You obviously switched to a Pro V1X here, so.
So actually, probably, I know it's a single shot, but actually probably quite a useful one to use.
Yeah, I don't think that's far off the beaten track.
So that shot there, we can see launch of 14 degrees, spin to 7 to 8, 3.5 degrees up on it, very neutral path, half a degree from the inside, 2 degrees closed to path, so slight draw. Smash vector 149, with a driver we're looking at 1.5, 150. So good in terms of ball speed, but we'll be looking at how can we optimize that. What is a useful tool, as you said earlier, is this optimizer tab. So I can click onto this. Let's make sure it's using the right screen here. So put it onto carry in total. What we can see from that screen is actually there's a lot of good data there, but there is another 5-6 yards to get out of that once it hits the ground. Yeah. So you can see in the spin rate tab, that's on the upper half of that blue window. If we were prioritising carry, that's fine. But certainly UK golf, using the ground a little more, get a little bit more chase out, we get a bit more wind, so making sure the ball's going through the wind a bit more. If we can drop that spin by 500 revs, get it to sort of 2.2, then you're going to get a little more chase out.
Yeah, I think just following up on that, I know that this is a good fit for me as a driver. I've had good results with it for a number of years. I don't change my equipment unless there's something I don't like about it. And this has been a very, very good driver for me. It's interesting, you had the Pro V1X there.
Oh, right? That was just the,
Yeah, and I normally use a lower spinning ball.
Yeah.
For me, I would fancy good numbers with potentially just a change of ball. I know that I will find something more in the mid to low 2000s with a, let's say, a Bridgestone Tour BRX or a Pro V1 or an AVX, for instance. My launch window is a pretty good one there. I just would rather change that spin a hair maybe. But that's the subtleties of fitting as well, that discussion of golf ball. Yeah,
okay, that comes into, again, that's just another tool we can use. So whilst we've got heads and shaft touch-wise, launch and spin and ball speeds, depending on what you were getting with your irons with a certain ball type or certain kind of flight, would we want to affect one part of the bag more than the other? Does the ball work across all parts of the bag? And all these different things we look to use to optimise and get the best out of those numbers. So I think the thing with fitting is there are so many layers that you've got to your armoury. As long as we get consistency with a small tolerance, as I say, hence fitting, so if we were fitting you, would be using that Bridgestone ball that you use. So we'd see slight different spin data, so we wouldn't try and change something that didn't need changing. Again, another important part about fitting is, say, using the relevant products that you'd play on the course.
Yeah, I don't
particularly
think
golf
anyone's
ball.
aware, but just with the various numbers we got on TrackMan, that's only abbreviated form, but the options there, you can delve into your land angle and your height when you're fine tuning irons, for instance. So it's almost endless in what you can delve into.
And again, ultimately, again, depending on where someone's playing, you know, so if you play links golf, you're going to need a slightly different ball flight to someone who's playing, for example, you know, Wentworth West, you know, totally different course types. So again, gathering all the info you can from the player, talking to them at the beginning of the fit, understanding their game.
Yeah, knowing
what to focus
what
on.
their weaknesses in the current bag are, and just chipping away, But these are fantastic tools for the purpose.
So hopefully that's given you a bit of an insight into some of the data that we use in the fit, how we use it. But so any other information, anything else you want us to go into and to go into the detail of and decipher for you, please let us know and we'll do those videos for you. Hope that helps.